And thank you both. Thank you, Dorinda. So, we keep talking about this huge crowd that we have here today. I think including me and Narda doing the live stream, it's 9 of us, which is more we've had in the building since March 15th of last year. And I almost forgot that you were here like our last Sunday before we nailed the door shut for several months. And I think that Sunday there was maybe not too many more people here than maybe 15, because there was, as I say, word was out on the street that something was up and we didn't know quite what it was or the severity of it, and people were already choosing to stay home. And I'd say that it was somewhat somber, as I recall, that Sunday. And I guess we were kind of taking that leap of faith into the unknown. And I think all of us thinking, a few weeks it'll be back to normal sort of thing. And so we've had, and I've talked a lot about this last year, this deep sense of really opportunities for growth. And really for the topic today of transformation, that transformation is, it often sounds like a better idea than it actually turns out to be, I think. Because we have this idea of what a transformed life might be, whether it's on the level of a New Year's resolution sort of thing, or a major change within. We have an idea of how that would be, or how amazing it would be. Maybe think of it like, doing a big renovation on your house. It sounds amazing until you get into your third month of the walls being torn apart, and you think, was this such a good idea? And of course, I think that's a great idea, because especially if you do things like watch Property Brothers and all that, which I'm crazy about that. It's like you don't really know what's going on until you open the walls, and you see, was the electrician actually licensed that did this? And I even remember several years ago when we, did the remodel here, bringing it from a residence to a public building, and everything was open up, and our contractor just going, look at that, sort of thing. And of course, and here's another a little note that when your contractor says, look at that, it costs money. And so it's, it's really like, okay, the last thing you want to do is have your contractor call you and then say, we need to look at something. You really don't want that at all. So it's been one of those kind of years in a sense, and we're in a somewhat different place, kind of. We're starting to have discussions about opening up again, and I'll talk about that at our annual meeting a little bit later on. But again, there's no going back in a sense. It's not just saying, it's a do-over, we can just go exactly how it was. And much like you, Janet, I'm just really looking at everything. Well, how are we supposed to be doing our lives now? How are we supposed to be doing spiritual community? I don't even know if the word supposed to do is the right phrasing, but it's like, what is appropriate right now? I mean, what feels like the right thing to do as we have experienced a communal experience, as we have grown in many different ways, as there are still contentious conversations still going on in public, that people are not in full agreement at all. So how do we kind of venture out in this brave new world of transformation? And did we bite off more than we can chew, in a sense? Did we bring this on in some way? I have a great quote I want to read you from Scott Aubrey, and he's an author, and he says, "We are made for transformation. Changing a thought can create a new perspective. Choosing a different path can forge new triumphs. Changing a deeply held belief can transform the trajectory of one's life. Changing a single note can lift the mood of a melody. We are the composer of our life song. We are made for transformation." And so we have two cultural stories of transformation that are significant stories that are happening right now. We have the story of Passover. Last night was the first night of Passover. It's 8 days. It goes over the story of Exodus and the Jewish people gaining their freedom from Egypt and making their way to find or found the nation of Israel. And of course, it's a very complicated and long and wonderful story. that's very different, yet has some similarities to the other story we're looking at right now, which is, we call this Holy Week, the last few days of Jesus. And today is Palm Sunday. And again, completely different stories, but not. They're stories of transformation. They're stories of getting to one place and ending up at a completely, significantly different place. It's looking at this idea that transformation, like I said, sounds like a great idea until you're having to actually leave your front door and do some really uncomfortable things. It's in both these stories, you come up against, I guess, false beliefs and fears within yourself. And even partway through the story saying, did we really want to do this? I mean, this is just too much, in a sense. Wouldn't it be safer just to go back and have a do-over in our safe little world kind of thing? And imagine all of us that when we've come to significant crossroads and we've really started to get the ball rolling and we've kind of like burned our bridges a little bit, there's still that idea, at least there has with me, is like, what am I doing? I said I wanted transformation, but this is so uncomfortable and it's painful and there's great loss and maybe I've not really seen the gain that I want yet. So it's this really mixed sort of thing that we find in both these stories, again, of Passover and Holy Week. And as we look at our transformational stories, is that we're not always good at reading the clues along the way. That we can fall into our own mini delusions or our human ego thinking that it's one thing and not another. Or we think that, again, this was going to be, like say, easy peasy and not so much. And in a way, the Palm story aspect of the story is like that for me. It's called the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, which I call it the other title is Things Aren't What They Appear. So if you were raised in Christianity, you know a lot more about this than some who weren't. But for those who weren't, Jesus came into Jerusalem with a huge crowd, cheering him on. And there was this thought that he was a political leader and that he was going to rise as their king and bring them to freedom and get rid of those Romans and the people that are doing harm in their country. So there was this idea that now is the moment. This is when it's going to happen. A big, political change is going to happen. But just look a few days ahead of this week, it didn't turn out that way. For one thing, Jesus wasn't meant to be a political leader. And within a few days, he was arrested and meeting his death. And then, of course, the huge moment in Christianity of his resurrection. But we can have those false moments, in a sense, where we think, this is pretty easy. This is great. We can be, in a sense, self-delusional, like it's all going to happen right now. Like even last year, this will be a couple weeks. We'll be back before anyone knows it, that we are even gone. So there's that aspect of that transformation that I think we all have to come to kind of like a purge of what we thought was going to happen, a purge of kind of the old that we thought that maybe we could hold on to just a little bit. And there really needs to be that moment of complete release. The moment of course, many moments in the Passover story that I love about that of like, okay, we have to go with this. There is no going back. The crossing of this Sea of Reeds when, the sea parts and then they cross and the sea comes back. It's a great moment in the movie, but it really says there's no going back here. Regardless of how difficult you think it is right now, look, the water went back. You can't go back. And I think we've probably had a lot of those mini moments this year was like, oh, we can't just put a Band-Aid on this and go back. That there's so many things that are contentious that we need to talk about in a respectful way that we just can't go on pretending that these things don't exist. So often there is that moment where you can't go back. I mean, there always was, in a sense, you can't go back, but that realization, oh, this really is transformation. And kind of a similar moment in the Holy Week story later on as Thursday when Jesus was on the verge of being arrested in great prayer. and I'm paraphrasing this, in his prayer saying, do we really have to do this? Is there any other way? I mean, intuitively, he's seen what's coming and saying, come on, there's got to be another way to do this. And I think often when we come to those truly transformative moments that just seem such a burden on our shoulders, we ask ourselves that question, do I really have to do this? Do I really have to do this in this way? Do I really have to do this in this way that is such a complete release and letting go of what was before in order to come to the new? And more often than not, the answer is no, you have to go forward. We have to, let go of what was before and face and come to terms with a new transformation, even if in the short term it's really difficult and even painful. So there's a couple things that we can ask ourselves in this process, because we all have this process. Again, there's big moments of transformation in our lives, and there's smaller moments in our transformation in our lives. And as this quote, it says, we are made for transformation. So first of all, just know that there's never a time that we're not transforming. We're never standing still. And even if you feel that you're in a stage in your life where you don't have a career anymore and you're kind of hanging out at home most of the day, still you are transforming. It may be a slower evolution, but we still are. That's part of life. When we're done transforming, then we go on to whatever's next. But it's always a process. So here's something to ask ourselves, because we're always, as human beings, looking at what is that next version of what we're doing, even if it seems like we're at a later time of our life. And the first thing, at least as I intuitively come to these ideas that, okay, change is happening, or it's going to happen, a really serious question is to ask, am I willing? And it's a trick question, too, because when I ask myself, am I willing, because I just get those weird little feelings that change is afoot. We don't even know what we're saying yes to or what I'm willing to do. It's this big act of faith to intuitively have this idea that transformation is in the process, and to come against my human ego and say, am I willing? And the question that I think to go with it is, and what would willingness entail? And of course, this is where sometimes our human ego get in. What does my willingness entail? What would I actually have to do? How will I have to step out in a different way that makes me uncomfortable or seems painful in some way, or makes me leave something that's really, that I even love, that is part of me, that somehow it seems like that's transitioning in a different form? To be with that, am I willing? And what does that entail? Big questions. And of course, answers, at least through our spiritual practice, what I have found aren't always 100% as clear as we would like them to be. So we ask ourselves, what would that entail? As I take that to prayer, and we don't get an email with a 10-point list. That our connection with Spirit is something intuitive, and it is something you have to go with almost on a day-to-day basis, or on, as I say, a need-to-know kind of basis. That's how it works with Spirit. You don't really get an itinerary. You just kind of get a need-to-know. And this whole experience that we've had together in the last year has been part of that, am I willing for me? About 2 years ago, and I think I've shared this on a Sunday, I was getting this just a feeling that something was coming. And I, of course, didn't have the slightest idea. And it felt very personal. And it almost felt like that it was going to be such a complete change for me personally that I could be leaving Light on the Mountains, that I could be leaving the valley, that it just had this sense of, it's really big whatever it is. And again, these questions, am I willing? It was like, well, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go anywhere. I'm really pretty happy right here. I'm pretty happy with RL over here on Sundays. But this idea that there's something big afoot. And it just, again, it felt very personal. And it felt like in my career I would be doing something completely different. And again, are you willing? What would that willingness entail? And the concern and just panic within me, like, what do you mean I would have to change what I'm doing? Again, I really like what I'm doing. But it felt like I would have a completely different career and job. And guess what? I do. Everything's different. I come to the same place, but, there's 9 of us here today. A little over a year ago, there would be 60, 65 or so of us here. But it's more than that. It really has for all of us to really dig deep and say, well, what should I or need to be up to right now? And it has been such a year for me of interchange of me personally, looking at my role as your minister, of again, just as light in the mountains as a spiritual community. How do we do spiritual community now when we don't have the same resources that we had before? So my intuition was spot on and 100% right. Everything is different. My career is completely different. What I'm doing in my life is completely different. In a sense, I'm living in a completely different community because it's all changed. And there has never been that moment of, we like clean questions and answers to say, yes, I'm willing, and this is what I have to do, and it feels great now because we have all that answered, but it's never really answered. And so here's like the bonus question that's really the most important one. So in this mayhem of our lives, whether it's now or another 10 years from now when we have a different set of circumstances, in this, to ask ourselves with willingness, and what does that involve? The bigger question is this mine to do? And I can't tell you how much I hate that question, because I have found that the answer is usually yes, and it's usually a yes to something I really don't want to do. It's like, it's almost like, let's make a deal. I really want box number A, but I'm saying that I have to go to box number B, but this was, the car was behind number A, and I really wanted that. But it always seems like transformation is coming to that, that inner, and in a sense, it's almost initially a dread of, that's mine to do. But I have found that after I get over my humanness of that I can see how appropriate that road that I'm not so crazy about is. And how many blessings there are actually in that strange road that I had hoped to avoid in some way. And I think this is a lesson for all of us right now. We have all been on a very strange road. And as we live through the stories of the season of Passover and Holy Week, to realize that so much about those stories are about us right now. And how we can get inspiration from reading between the lines of those stories, of how people dealt with the different issues of those times. Very much the issues of not only now, but of all times. And to realize that what we are really doing, something that is just, as we say, changing of our minds in a sense, changing our inner dialogues, and changing within ourselves what we believe is possible for us, what is possible for the world, and that it not only is an ongoing process, but more often than not, it's a very gradual. We have these big events like the pandemic, but a lot led up to that. So I just want to finish today with a quote from Ernest Holmes about this. And he says, "We do not change all of the patterns of our thought in a moment. Rather, it takes a place little by little until gradually the old thought patterns become transformed into new ones by some inner alchemy of the mind, the operation of which we do not see, but the manifestation of which we do experience." So that's what we're doing right now. We are changing our minds. So let's just take this to prayer for a moment. And know absolutely the power and presence of Spirit of the divine of God is right here, right now, where we are. It is with each person who's viewing here today, each person in this room, each person in this world that is just connected to that power and presence of Spirit at a cellular level. And I affirm for us that we open our mind and our hearts to listen to that voice at a greater level. That we know what is ours to do right now. That in spite of the appearance even of confusion, of dilemmas, of things in our mind going wrong, we know what to do. We know that healing is not only possible, but it is inevitable. That it exists right here, right now, as we open ourselves up to that transformation. So with that, I just express our thanksgiving for each of us here today, our gratitude that these things are possible even if we don't quite see them yet. And as we know they are possible and as we are thankful for them, we release our words and we release our attachment. We just let go and let God, knowing that once we do so, amazing things happen. And so it is.